start with the Indian economy, Amir, because that is very important for us, particularly for us to get some sense of what's happening. So to initiate this discussion, let me throw some numbers. You know that COVID has hit the Indian economy, and COVID is something what, as an economist, we call it exogenous, something what the planner or the policymakers didn't plan for. And just to put things into perspective, the size of the economy actually shrank from around $2.9 trillion in 2019-20 to 2.6 trillion in 2020-21. Now, GDP growth has also slowed down from 4% in 2019 to negative 8% in 2020-20. And we are hoping that because it is negative 8%, which is a low base, this year will be growing at least 9%. But now what I hear, what World Bank or IMF or ADB are predicting, that our economy is going to grow at 6%. Now, there is a problem with this slow growth rate, and as an economist, I think you know it better, which is there will be lesser number of jobs which are going to get created. And more importantly, because people have less job opportunities, the income distribution is going to be more skewed. We already read in newspaper, and Oxfam has come out with a report where they are suggesting that the super rich like Ambanis and Adanis of the world, they are becoming richer. And people like maybe you and me, I don't know about, and I mean, we are still lucky because we are in the services sector, but most of others, they are without any jobs, and the income distribution is becoming highly skewed. In fact, some of the sectors are actually gaining. For instance, if you are working in the services sector, you will find that these are the people who are working in their home without their income getting affected. In fact, a friend of mine who works as a HR manager at TCS was telling me that TCS even has given a pay hike. So the concern is, here is a set of people, larger set of people who are actually getting affected from the slowing down of the economy, but only a very few among us who are getting maybe benefited. So as an economist, what do you suggest, what do we do about it? You are mute. You're on mute.
Thanks so much, Nilanjan. Can you hear me fine now?
Yeah.
So thanks so much for this. It's quite an honor to be speaking to you first, because you're somebody who I really admire for all the work you've done. But also at the Mahindra University, a new, very well-known place in Hyderabad, a city that I belong to, a city that I admire. And in organizing this conversation, because I think that this conversation is really critical for our students, particularly because they are going to now get into a world that is a post-COVID world. And in this, it will be important to address a few issues that you have raised. Now, what is this that? Just a second, please, Nilanjan. I get an echo on my.
You need to log out from your.
Okay. Now I'm doing fine. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. So therefore, I noticed that there are some of my friends here. Devashish Rooj is also here. Thanks so much, everybody, for having joined. Professor Samin Fatima is here. Thanks so much, all of you. It's an honor to be speaking to everyone on this particular issue. Now, see, the core question that Nilanjan is asking on the economy itself is an important one, and the point that he made about the services sector and the manufacturing sector is again a very critical issue. Now, therefore, Nilanjan, my observation is that this growth rate that you are talking about is the big cause for concern. And you see, what has happened is that the first point that we need to make is that India's growth rate has been declining much earlier than COVID. it is very easy to blame COVID on what is happening. But if you see all the indicators in December 2019, much before we even knew the spelling of Wuhan, in December 2019, you found that our unemployment rate was the highest ever. In the last 45 years, it basically means highest ever. The growth rate has slowed down to the lowest growth rate in about 17 quarters. Exports had been declining for 23 quarters consistently, and the exchange rate was at its lowest. So it is December 19 that where the problem starts, and after COVID, the economy just goes into a free fall. But the point to note is that most of the structural issues are becoming serious before COVID. So we have to make that distinction, and that is an important distinction, particularly for all the students who are listening to us and deciding their future. Now, the point that Nilanjan is making, the important point that he is making is that in some sense there is a protection that the service sector has. But Nilanjan, that's where I want to make the first important point, because I am addressing this mostly to new students and future students. The point I'm making here is that see what happened in COVID was something that was rather unprecedented, and that is where most of us economists are getting worried. You all know that we had 100 million people without jobs before COVID, and that went up to about 180 million by conservative estimates. Most of these were the unskilled labor. Most of these were the migrant unskilled labor who you saw walking back home in those gruesome pictures in the first lockdown. But there is a slight, while the picture is very macabre and horrifying, the future for them is not so bleak, because what happens is that as soon as the economy starts going back, these people find jobs. It's easier. It's pretty easy for them to find jobs, and that's what you saw. You saw that the unemployment rate, which had gone up assuming high, came back to a stable, 6-7% for migrant labor and for unskilled labor. The problem is with people like us, Nilan, that when we lose our jobs, then even when the economy picks up, it is very difficult to get those jobs back. And that is the problem that we are seeing, that the educated unemployed are the ones that are very vulnerable today.
So let me interject. In fact, what you said is so true, because if I'm looking into the overall unemployment number, it is around 8%. But if I'm talking about the unemployment among the graduates, it's actually 15%. Like, as you correctly mentioned, for this migrant labor, it's quite easy for them to find a job, because they're, as Bhagavati would call it, it's more like a splintering effect. You still need watchmen for your society. You still need someone to ferry your, let's say, product using Swiggy or Zomato of the world. So the so-called the gig workers, But as you correctly mentioned, it is the people who want to get employment in the services, in the skill services and the manufacturing sectors. These are the ones who are actually in bad shape.
And they find it difficult to get the job back, because what happens, Nilanjan, and again for everybody, what happens is that in the organized sector, in the educated sector, in the slightly skilled sector, we all get very quickly accustomed to a lower staff count. All of you who are watching this will know that it's very easy for me, because I have now lost 5 people and I only have 7 people, and they are doing the work. So for me, it is great. I keep those 5, make them do the work, and I cut costs by nearly 120%. So that is the seductive nature of this kind of unemployment, and that is what we have to watch out for when we are training and teaching our skilled workforce. So, and that is why it's important that universities like the Mahindra University, like professors like Nilanjan Banik become important. Because, I make a serious point, Nilanjan, because because you see what you are doing is that you are now talking about courses that are ready for this technology-driven world. You are not talking about courses that the Hyderabad University or the Meerut University will teach, which belongs to a manufacturing driven world that is pre-technology, pre-COVID. Your goal, therefore, and the goal of this seminar is exactly that, is to see what the new youngsters who don't have those jobs that went away, but have new jobs, are going to look forward to. So to all of you, while we started off on a somber note, saying that unemployment is going up and that jobs are lesser, the good news is that the new jobs that are going to hit the market will need new skills. They will not hire people who passed out 5 years ago and 10 years ago. They will hire people who are going to pass out next year and the year after. That is the good news for you.
In fact, what you said is so true, because again, I was looking at the numbers, so the NSS data suggests that there are around 984 universities in India. Now, every year, around 37 million students get enrolled for graduation, out of which 4 million does distance education, and we have close to 15 lakhs graduate who pass out as engineers. Now, I still remember when I was a young kid, like most of these students, our parents used to have aspiration that my son will either become a doctor or an engineer. Now, of course, you can see I have failed with that aspiration of my parent. So eventually I turned as an economist, but I don't, in looking behind, I don't regret, because nowadays, if you talk to some of the young graduate engineers, their starting salary is around 20,000, and a top-notch driver gets a cab driver, he makes more than that, So I think what you mentioned a few minutes back is very important, that we are, I think, most of the universities in India, they are failing to impart the necessary skill which is required for this new age world,
I'll stop you here for a minute and, you talked about not becoming an engineer. Well, the bad news is that I became one, right? Like a poor South Indian, I had no choice but to get into engineering college, otherwise you were useless. And then what happened? We were 63 who joined the Department of Electronics and Communication in the Osmania University, one of the top universities at that time. 45 of us graduated. Of the 45, there are 2 today who work as engineers.
Okay.
43 of us are economists, civil servants, managers, data analysts. So, the job...
Yeah, you also got in through the civil servant.
And I also went into the civil service, So, I did engineering, went away and did management, then got into the IAS, then became a professor of economics. And that is the case with most of my classmates. You see, what has happened is that while we learned a lot of useful skills in college, it was great. There was no question about it. But what we had to do to get into good jobs was to reskill ourselves, and we did that extreme. And that is the focus that new institutions should have. Those skills that are skills for 2025 and 2030.
In fact, I was shocked to see a recent news article published by Times of India, which says that the median salary for a fresh graduate in engineering graduate is only 2.5 lakhs. So then why do it?
And that's if you're lucky, Nilanjan.
That's if you're lucky.
See, of the 1.5 million who graduate, if you are in the 500,000 who get jobs, then your salary is 2.5 lakhs.
Yes.
So
that is actually so true, because out of 15 lakhs, only 3 lakhs are able to get the jobs. And their median is 2.5 lakhs. So which tells me that, which brings me to the next thing, that as a government, what we should do in order to ensure that the quality of education, that is, because it's a clear an issue of people or some private university taking advantage of the system, So do you think that there is a need to standardize the curriculum, or ensure that most of the universities, whatever they are delivering, there should be some body to oversee that they don't dupe the parents, or they don't dupe the students and float whatever. I still remember during last time when I was in Hyderabad, there were many engineering colleges which were getting closed. So of course the market will take care of it. Now we see the corporate coming into the pictures, and they are backing all these private universities, including ours, which is backed by Mahindra's. But do you think that apart from market, government can also do something in order to ensure that the quality of education is somehow guaranteed?
Niranjan, this is a tough question, and my honest answer is that I don't think we need another regulatory body. We've had very, very bad experience with regulatory bodies who by way of standardizing syllabi got a race to the bottom, which we all suffered from. I think that we have to depend on people like you who will take the university to a different level, simply because you are going to offer a fabulous international degree and a course, and your reputation, and that is what will drive quality. It will not be a body that is that's a renamed AICTE or whatever that will decide what the course structure should be. Look at some of our engineering schools, some of the better engineering schools. The moment they realize that they are going to face this problem of unemployment, they altered their courses, and they got a heavy dose of, for example, I know of at least 3 which gave a very solid dose of economics. I was very happy to note one university which approached me and said 5 years ago, they said that, sir, we've done a careful analysis of where our engineers get jobs, and we find that a large number of them are now getting jobs in the healthcare sector.
Okay.
So why don't you do a course for them on health economics? I was shocked. I said engineering, health economics, but they did a careful analysis of their placements and found that it was General Electric and all the medical devices people who were hiring these engineers. So they ought to know what the difference between TB and COVID. Okay. And that is when we actually ran. And that's the opportunity that we have here, Nilanjan. Okay. And that's why I'm so happy that you are, that you all are taking a lead in this, because you clearly understand where the wind is blowing, where the jobs are, what the sunrise sectors are. And that is what we need our children to get skilled on. For example, when you were teaching courses in economic policy, right? It was the direction was policy, and that is when your students got better jobs, because they had a good understanding of economic policy or development policy. Mm-hmm. So that is how we will tailor our courses, and for that, what we need is greater freedom to universities than lesser freedom, less standardization and more diversity.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have to ask you another challenge that we are facing at the time of COVID, which is about, because we mentioned about technology, and one aspect is we are now doing online teaching. Yes. Now, the online teaching is problematic, not so much for people like us, but for people who are living in small towns and villages. In all probability, if you happens to come from a small town or village, then either electricity connection or connectivity, internet connectivity is a big issue. Even at Bennett, where I used to work a few months back, we used to listen student complaining that, sir, we cannot take up the exam, or we cannot come to your classroom. We don't know whether it's true or not true, but they used to say that, I cannot afford the data because my parents are not that rich. Yeah. In fact, when I went and looked into the NSSO of 2017, it says that 6% of the rural household and 25% of the urban household has computer.
That's
now,
right.
in terms of internet connectivity, the data suggests, again, 17% in urban areas and 42% in 42% in the urban area, and only 17% in the rural area, they have internet connectivity. And this is, again, very important, because we are talking about the income distribution. Most of the students, most of the people in the living in small town or in rural areas, they live in one room apartment, and which means that even if I want to attend a class, even if I have internet connection, even if I have power connection, but because the family size is more, somehow I'm not able to carefully attend the class. And if you happen to be a girl child, and there are some studies to suggest that anyway I will be pulled for doing all these household chores, which means that in terms of gender also, if I'm considering the gender as a output, there are problems. So how do we face this challenge of online teaching at the time of COVID?
Brilliant, Nilanjan. This is a very critical point. In all the places that I teach, every place we face that problem. At the Indian School of Business, where you have rich kids studying, at the National Law School, where you have the brightest people. At the IAS training institute that we have in Telangana, where I teach, in each of these places we had exactly the same problem. Now, it is a fact that online education has actually been detrimental to a lot of our students. There is a lot of data coming in now, and I can give you very simply that the better state, Telangana is a better state. In Telangana, at best, we have been able to reach about 28% of our children. This is the best state. Imagine Bihar, where 4%, where only 4% could access online education. So the fact is that online education has been great for us as faculty, because I could just move from my drawing room into my study and start my class with zero disturbances and all my notes in front of me. But for students, it has been disempowering, and that's why you find that estimates are that about 25 million children have left school forever. They will never come back. The SDG on literacy for all has suffered a huge setback. As has another SDG which is very relevant to all of us, which is gainful employment. You see, what has happened is that...
And for the benefit of the audience, what is gainful employment?
Okay, thanks. Thanks for asking that question. I always explain it to my students in class that, you see, what does employment mean? What does gainful, or what does relevant, or what does useful employment, or as the SDG says, decent employment mean? It means something that adds to the GDP, right? So even if the country is producing 100 rupees worth of goods, if you join and that becomes 100 plus delta or 101, then that is gainful employment. If it only means that I take some money out of Nilanjan's pocket and put it in yours, then that is not gainful employment. There was this one member of parliament who was arguing that begging is employment, isn't it? And you see, and he's right, this fellow who's begging is earning money. But the problem is that George is taking 10 rupees out of his pocket and giving him money. It is just a transfer. It is not a value addition. And that is why that famous quote where, we were encouraged to fry pakoras, that is not really gainful employment. It is not something that people aspire for. You can do various things. So gainful employment is something that is value added. And that is what you all hopefully are going to get into, value added jobs. So that SDG also is going to get hit, Nilanjan, because you see a lot of these jobs that we are now looking at are merely either just transfers of money or some people argue one of the standard things in 101 economics is that suppose somebody is a robber, he goes and robs somebody's house and earns 10,000 rupees. Now, isn't that adding to the GDP? Isn't that something that is gainful? He is supporting his entire family with that money. No, it is not, because it is just a transfer of money. So therefore, what we have to look at are jobs that add to the national economy. Nilanjan's column today talks about how this year we've actually seen, for the first time in our living history, we have seen a contraction in the economy, where the economy was 2.8 trillion and contracted to 2.6 trillion. And here, Nilanjan, one point that everybody should understand is that in countries like India, growth rate is very critical, is very crucial. Why do we constantly hanker after high growth rate? Why do we want a 10% growth rate all the time? You see, the reason for that is not that we want to, become Adani or Ambani and become all of us get more money. No, the policy reason for a high growth rate is because there is a very strong correlation between rate of growth and employment. There is enough data that suggests that if GDP growth rate comes down by 1%, right? Hear me out. I hope you understand what I'm saying. If GDP growth rate comes down by 1%, employment goes down by 0.5%. See, that's a huge impact. That is why when growth goes from 8% to 7%, you can't say, oh, but 7% is growth, isn't it? It is growth, definitely. But it means that 0.5% of our jobs are gone forever. Now, if growth has come down from 9% to minus 8%, you can imagine what's going on. In the 2 years, and this is Nilanjan's calculation that I was reading today, in the 2 years, effectively, we would have grown by just 2%, which means that from the 6% that we were growing in 2017-18, we would have lost at least 7% of our total jobs, lost them. That is why it is serious. That is why growth rate is serious. And that is why when this year, India's growth rate was lower than every single economy in the world. You see, every economy got impacted by COVID, but our growth rate fell the sharpest. And that is why looking at the economy is very important, and looking at the recovery is very important. The recovery is coming. It will definitely come. Sooner or later, we have some structural problems. It might take a little longer. But by the time you guys who are joining this year are graduating, we are certainly seeing a recovery. And therefore, we have to prepare you for the jobs that will emerge in 2024 and 25.
Very well said. But I also want to bring down another important topic. How much are we to blame the technology? Because what is also happening is technology is also taking away the jobs. So whether we have COVID or no COVID, but if you see, even in the automobile assembly line, now it's the robotics who are actually doing the work of the laborers, and there are plenty of such instances, even I was talking with another friend of mine who teaches right now in the US. He was suggesting maybe 10 years down the line, they will not require any more professors, because everything, even in US, most of the kids are now, they are going for home study, they are not even going to school, because everything is documented, everything is available over net. So how much of this technology is also going to take away the job, and what should we do so that technology become a complement, not a substitute, for the job creation thing?
Tough question, Nilanjan, because you're really asking an economist who's very good at analyzing past data to now predict the future. So, we economists, we can't tell you what will happen tomorrow, but we'll give you a very good understanding of what happened yesterday. So,
right.
but on this job front, Nilanjan, what is for sure is that this whole Industrial Revolution 4 is going to see a major automation of work.
Yeah.
But if you see the history of the world for the last 200 years, especially post the Industrial Revolution, almost always technology has presented the specter of falling employment. You remember when we were joining work, when I was, you're far too young. Then the computers were supposed to take away all jobs.
Right.
The banks were supposed to close down, but it was exactly the opposite that happened. So I think that if you go by the historical trend, yes, we will see a lot of automation take away a lot of traditional jobs. It will take away the jobs of didactic professors like Amirullah Khan, but it will not be able to replace a dynamic Nilanjan Bani.
So that's why I think they have coined the word humble, So
I'm actually making that point in the sense that, you see, what will happen is that a lot of accounting jobs will go away, right?
Right.
Surgeons might be replaced by robots. They already are. But you will not be able to take away the doctor. You will not be able to take away the philosopher teacher. You will not be able to take away the auditor. You can take away the accountant. So what will happen is that jobs will necessarily change. The Stanford University has a brilliant project that is looking at jobs in 2040, and it tells you that what are those jobs that will go away. And some of those that I mentioned, surgeons and accountants and so on, will go away, but you will see a lot more jobs coming in, which will require a multidisciplinary approach and an analytical approach, a lot of soft skills, the ability to think as an economist. Those are the kind of things that will burgeon, and that is what we have to prepare students for, and that is what the new courses are doing. So you are not only so you're not a technologist. In my time, if you could write some code, or if you could debug a Y2K problem, then you got a great job. But now, or if you could type, in our days, if you learned typewriting, then you got a job. Now those skills are inbuilt. Those skills are by and by. It's like driving. What you have to learn is skills on top of that. Nilanjan, there was this principal of Eton, the famous British school, who was telling us one day that when kids come into his class in the first standard, he tells them that 90% of you will go to jobs that don't exist today. Okay. Right? So if there is a third standard or a fifth standard student today who knows what he's going to be, then that is extremely foolish, because that job is not going to be there when he's graduating. That is true about most of our university students now. That when they come into a BA first year, 5 years later, they will join jobs that might not be there today. When I was doing electronics engineering, this whole computer graphics and stuff, we didn't even know about. Now it's there everywhere. So that ability to look forward is something that we need to worry about.
I think you are giving a very important message, which is, even in terms of designing the curriculum, it has to be dynamic, and just to be ensure that we teach what is required in the job market, So, and therefore, this whole idea of collaborating with the industry, trying to know from them what is the required skill set. In fact, in one of our program, BBA in digital technology, we have entered into a collaboration with Bond Group. It's a big group based out of US. And essentially what we are trying to figure out that what are the required skills, which is still in vogue in the job market. So I think that's a very important thing. And because I really love to continue this discussion with you, because so many important things are coming up. But in the interest of time, I will ask you one last question, and then I will open it up for the audience. Is what message you have to give for our economics and finance graduate? Because these are the kids who are going to pass out 3 years from now. So what type of skill do you think they should acquire for them to be relevant or stay relevant in the job market?
Yeah. Thanks, Nilanjan. When somebody like you asks me to give this answer, I realize that I am getting into dangerous territory. What if it doesn't happen like that? But, if you look at past trends, and if you see what is happening, especially in India, there are certain very clear answers that we have. For all of you who are graduating in economics and finance, one of the largest sectors that is opening up is economic policy. See, that is a big sector. And what does economic policy mean? You see, what is happening is, and this is a good sign that Indian policy making is showing, however much we can be politically, ideologically placed, what is a good thing that has happened in India over the past is that now more and more policy is evidence-based. When we pass policy, pass laws or acts or rules, whether it is at the center or state or even at the municipal levels, you will find that a lot of our young elected representatives are actually asking these questions. So what does this policy mean? What does it do? What will be its impact? What is the cost of implementing this policy? And this is what economists do very well. This is what you all will be taught. How do you measure the cost of income? Or, take an example like a NREGA. What is the cost of implementing that scheme? And what is the benefit? And obviously, as a rational person, if the benefit exceeds the cost, go do it. If it does not, stop it. So what will happen is that a lot, and it's already happening, the number of people who I, for example, employ who can measure impact. I for a long time, I was with the Gates Foundation, and at Gates Foundation, we always used to look for economists who could go out there and tell us that we have done this intervention on TB, this intervention on HIV/AIDS, this intervention on maternal health, and this is a lousy investment because the costs are higher than the benefits. Or this is a great investment. Online teaching, Nilanjan, is the cost higher than the benefit?
But my fear is, if you're suggesting that maybe intervention in TB or HIV is bad compared to others, don't you think, if you talk to any doctor friends of yours, they will now tell you that because people are so involved with COVID, other diseases are getting neglected.
They are.
Yeah. So there is also a flip side to it, right?
And who pointed it out? It were these economists who were working on it. They pointed it out. It was not the doctors, because the doctors got carried away with COVID. Yeah. It was the economists who said that, look at TB, 1 million people are dying. How can you stop funding that? So that's a good example. So, so therefore that's one major area, and it's employing lots of people. I was telling you that at the Gates Foundation, we used to look for such people, and unfortunately, no university in India could give us these skills. We had to buy them from the US. And it is very expensive, right? So you will all have a great thing going as far as economic policy is concerned. The second area that you will have a lot of employment will be in terms of data. You see, as you can see, all that is happening today. The Pegasus story is what everybody knows. What is the Pegasus story? It is really a data story, right? Mm-hmm. So when you have tons and tons of data, when you have millions of rows and millions of columns, how do you analyze that? That is something that a good economist with good skills is able to do, and that is the future, right? Mm-hmm. A third area that again is important for economists and has been for a long time, but now because of large investments that are being made, is the ability to model growth, to model problems, to look at issues later on. A fourth area, and that I think, Nilanjan, is the biggest area that economists will get into, will be into decision making. You see, what I mean by that is that, a lot of us are employed as managers, right? Several of you are managers. When you are managing something, what are you doing? Managing essentially is decision making, right? From a list of options, you have to choose the best, and you can make mistakes. Now, it is a good economist who is skilled in game theory, skilled in modeling, who can say that, okay, of the following options, the best option is X. You want to stop corruption. There are various ways of doing it. Is demonetization the best way of doing it? Right? So you take that decision, and it's a big decision. It impacts millions of people. It impacts millions of people for 5, 6, 7 years, as we are seeing in India. So that is the area where you feel that you'll find that a lot of the traditional managers will be replaced by the economists who will have the skill to choose the right variables and decide. And that's why, let me give you simple examples. The big managers of the world, the most successful managers of the world, could they predict the 2008 crisis? And look at the trillions of dollars we lost. Could we predict COVID-19? Right? So therefore, that is one skill so these are the 4 big areas. I'm sure there are several more, Nilanjan. I'm sure that some economists will also become great javelin throwers and win the next goal. Yes. But these 4 are very critical skills that forward-looking institutions, that institutions that are dexterous and dynamic will be able to deploy.
Thank you very much. I think it's been a great listening to you. There is so much newer information that you brought to the table. And I'm sure that our student community also have gained quite a bit. So now let me open it to the audience. If you have any question for Professor Amir. So I already have a question. So it says that, do you think stable coin can take over as currency? So I think what she is referring, so this question is coming from Shreyas. She's asking that
She's asking about Bitcoins. Yes.
Yeah, Bitcoins.
Yeah, Shreyas, again, such a tough question. The Bitcoins have been around for a while. Some of us who are skeptical thought that this is a fad and it will disappear very quickly. It hasn't. It's actually become a fairly strong investment decision. So, the safe answer that I will give is that while cryptocurrencies don't appear to be taking over the currency function, they are certainly becoming very strong investment portfolio for parts of your investment portfolio. So I don't know, but because I'm very skeptical about these. The Reserve Bank of India is very skeptical, but I think that it might become a good investment destination, not necessarily a transactional instrument, not necessarily something that is a negotiable instrument. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think
it's a tough question. Yeah.
As a trader, you would like to shy away from cryptocurrency because it's highly volatile,
Very volatile.
Very volatile. But maybe if I'm looking into the long-term trend, maybe it's a good investment idea. So that would be the short answer. So do we have any other question for Professor Amish? Guys, don't feel shy. Please ask if you have a question. Ajay, Prashant Tak is asking question. Can you talk about the possibility of realizing decent work, meaning as in
brilliant,
better working conditions?
Brilliant question.
In the informal sector.
Yeah, very good question, Prashant. And the reason I think it's a great question is because for the first time we saw what all of us who were not, professional development economists saw the working conditions of our labor. When they started walking back home, we suddenly realized that these are people who don't have a home. These are people who we pay a pittance to, and they live in such horrible conditions. And that's the labor arbitrage that is there. That's the wage arbitrage they have. That is why most of us are able to afford to live in cities, because we have very, very poorly paid help. You can get a house help for $20. You can get a driver for $100. You can get a gardener for $10. And that is the reason. So therefore, I think this question becomes very critical. And that is why in the informal sector, Prashant, there are a number of policy initiatives that we must take, beginning from a very thorough redefinition of minimum wages. Imagine that the minimum wage in India now, right, with all this, now we are talking about $100 of minimum wage for a family of 5 living in an urban center. Now, that is ridiculous beyond any doubt. So we have to have discussion on fair income. We have to have a discussion on better working conditions. I mean, we have to start looking at how people live. Nilanjan talked about, online education to people who live in a 10 by 10 room, sharing with 10 other people. How on earth are they going to study? So you are so right that the importance of looking at decent work, decent working conditions, decent living conditions is so very critical. I hope that we are able to, at least after this tragedy, look into that issue. Thankfully, there is some talk about the minimum wage legislation. Not enough. Some of us are pushing hard for that. There is some talk about ensuring that everybody has health insurance. Look at it. Isn't it really sad that we are facing COVID and our work conditions are so health insurance is so minimal. Less than 10% of us have health insurance outside the government sector, and that is why one of the things that we all faced when we fell ill or our family fell ill was that we became impoverished.
No, but I can also argue, because this is something like what Jagadish Bhagwati famously said about the splintering effect. As the economy continue to grow, you will have demand for all this subsidiary helping hands, like someone who is going to work as domestic help, someone who is going to work as watchman. But I can also argue something on this line, saying that it is better to have something rather than having nothing. And what's your take on this idea of universal basic income?
I think, Nilanjan, that especially going back to our talk on technology, we have no choice. a universal basic income is something whose time has come, as Kaushik Basu said 12 years ago. So, so I think that that is certainly something we can't shy away from. There is enough literature on that. Those who are interested will have a longer chat later, but it's a very important topic. I'll just get to George Verghese. George.
Yeah, George has asked a very important question.
George, the answer is that we don't have very many renowned economists, and there is only one, and that is
read the question for the
yes.
So my colleague George is asking, despite having several renowned economists and learned academicians in India, can't our economy do much better? Where are we going wrong, and why are we not able to translate this knowledge into effective policy framework? In fact, if I were to add to what George is asking, why can't we have Kaushik Basu or Amartya Sen of the world, rather than preaching from US soil, come and work on Indian soil and try to make a difference?
Nilanjan, a mischievous answer to your question is, look at what we did to Rajan.
Right.
After we literally chased him away, each conference that I went for, whether it was in Europe or the US, they would look at me with as if I was some strange animal, saying, this is the best economist in the world, and you not only allowed him to go, you actually chased him away. You insulted him and let him go. Arvind Subramanian. I mean, so that's a strange thing, Nilanjan, as to why we don't do that. But George, to your question, one, I don't think we have several renowned economists. We have a very big paucity of. You look at the names that we are talking about, the same 4 or 5 names we are talking about for a country that is $3 trillion now. So we don't have enough. Secondly, do they have a say? I told you that, yes, a lot of our political leaders now want to take professional help. That is true. But you see, very often in big judgment, in big decisions, you will find that the economist or the professional is simply ignored. The demonetization experiment is a great example of that. All advice was put on standby, and we went ahead and took one decision that destroyed the economy for so many years. So there is I think the basic issue here is that we are yet not skilled enough, and that is why I think that it's important for us, and that is our responsibility as academics, that we have to train a whole new workforce that will be able to provide this inputs to the policymaker. We don't have enough, really. I mean, look at how many people. Can you name the number of economists who work on agriculture in India? That's my challenge to even the economists. And count on your fingers. Can you go past 5? Agriculture, 50% of India's workforce, some 300 million people work there. How many people work on labor? I don't know. I mean, I always have this problem that if I want to do a conference on any of these issues, health. I've done several conferences this year on health. How many economists do I know who have understanding of the healthcare sector? I again go back to Nilanjan or Devashish. Apart from that, do we have enough people? Nilanjan, you've written some fabulous papers on health and pharma. How many Indian references do you have? Right? So I think, George, it's really a supply problem. Of course, there is a big demand problem, right? Of course there is, but there I am telling you, I'm just asserting this point that there is a demand now, because there is some professionalism that is coming in, but there is a huge supply problem. In India, very often we confuse the two. Just to digress, Nilanjan, on a contemporary issue, look at the vaccination thing. Everybody is talking of hesitancy. Where does hesitancy come in? Hesitancy will come in when there is supply, isn't it? When you don't have vaccines, what difference does it make if people want to take it or not want to take it?
Right.
Today you go to a PHC, there is no vaccine. For 1,200 million doses we want, we have 100. So in the case of economists also, we need to produce them, and that's our responsibility, Nilanjan, as academics, as professors, we have to ensure that we produce a whole bunch of economists who are going to work in the policy space.
In fact, one of my professor in the US, she used to tell me that if you want to make a difference as an economist, you have to actually come out from your classroom and try to see the world, because don't get lost in alpha, beta, gamma, because that is not going to make much. It's good for you to get some paper published.
Yes.
And get some kudos. I'm not saying those are bad things, but
no, very, very important. Yeah.
At least you should be able to relate what you want to do with this knowledge of mathematics and statistics. Okay, I have another question from Tejashi. Yeah, Tejashi, please.
Good morning, professors. It's been a very informative and insightful session. Thank you so much for that. I had two questions, and the first one is that I just read about Raghuram Rajan, and I just found out that he's also an engineering graduate. So if there's some correlation between engineering graduates and economists. And the second question is that so I've always been very intrigued about jobs in the RBI and the World Bank.
Yeah.
And are they something related to economic policy? So these are my two questions.
So the first correlation, Tejasvi, it is a coincidence. The correlation is not with engineering and economics, it's with maths and economics. So, what happens is that a lot of engineers do 5 courses in maths. So therefore they learn economics easier. The second question, yes, RBI hires a number of economists. There is a whole, there are 2 or 3 streams by which they hire. One is through the Indian Economic Service, which is a fairly robust exam that is a good exam to write, and I encourage all those who do an undergrad or a postgrad in economics to take that exam. You can also get in RBI through the Indian Statistical Service. That's a lesser number, but the Indian Economic Service dominates. Then it's a brilliant.
I think we lost Amir. Oh, okay, you are there. Yeah.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear me. Yeah.
So there is a lateral entry that is that you will find at the deputy governor level. Economists like Rakesh Mohan, Subir Gokaran, they entered at the deputy governor level. You will soon find a Nilanjan Manik, somewhere there. Right?
Come on.
So that is one route. Manmohan Singh, for example, was another who entered there and became governor. So in the World Bank, yes, predominantly the largest number of people that the World Bank or the IMF employs are economists. And they are economists from across the world. The IMF will be more people who are working on finance, international finance, etc. The World Bank will have more number of people who are working on development issues. So, for example, right now, and this is answer also to George. Look at the big debate today. The big debate today, led from the very top, the big political economy debate is on population. Now, when you talk about population, who do you want to listen to? You want to listen to the development economists rather than to ideological arguments on, how many children does this fellow have and how many children does that fellow have and how many children should be mandated. So, in the World Bank, those are the kind of people who are employed. But Tejasvi, the World Bank used to be a very glamorous position some time ago. Now the World Bank doesn't employ so many people in India, but internationally it still is a very large employer.
Yeah, they have a quota from each country, I guess.
Yeah, and
India is losing out to China in a big way.
It is, and plus you get placed also, not so many in India, but even if you get employed from India, you will be placed in like this friend of mine who's now in Bangladesh, this other friend of mine who's in Ghana.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thanks, Nilanjan.
It's a great session, I guess. So much thing to learn from you, and I always look forward inviting you again for one such more session, and many more such sessions. Over at Finder. It will be a pleasure to listen to you as always. And if you don't have any question, let us end this thing. And thank you once more time,
Thank you, Nilanjan.
to take your time from your busy schedule and address to our student fraternity. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
See you soon.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Amir. The pleasure.
Thanks, Raman. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
We are old colleagues. Right? Thank you so much.